Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election from a well-oiled machine.
Now that the cold, hard truth is set in, Macedonia will not be getting an invitation from the EU to open accession talks anytime soon. A rift has set in between unlikely players, Zoran Zaev and his president, Stevo Pendarovski. Zaev continues to insist that there is no alternative to continue forward with the implementation of the so-called Prespa agreement, while President Stevo Pendarovski says, essentially, not so fast. At issue is Article 110b, which basically states that Macedonia does not have to enforce the agreement domestically unless and until those EU accession talks begin. Even the Greeks agreed with this. On top of all of this, Pendarovski admits that, quote, all Macedonians, unquote, are, quote, bothered by the adjective north, and that, quote, even today I can't get used to it, unquote, before adding reluctantly that, quote, maybe over time I will, unquote. Note the word maybe. For its part, the largest political party in Macedonia, Vomoroda Pomene, is now saying essentially they will overturn the agreement when they retake power. The Western elites who have championed Prespa soiled themselves upon hearing this. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the center of Tucson, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Suleimanov from Skopje, Macedonia.
How you doing, Cvetin?
Fine. Daylight savings time, so we had a bit of difficulty connecting for this episode. You don't have that in Arizona, right?
We do not have daylight savings time in Arizona, and I'll tell you why. Because in Arizona, who wants an extra hour of daylight in June when it is 150,000 degrees outside? So, no, and
you don't have a siesta like the Spaniards do, right?
Actually, we don't. No, that's a cultural item that's gone by the wayside. We probably had one here in the 1800s, but now that we're really hip and fast-paced and moving, we don't have that anymore. So. And I think the European Union is going to scrap it at some point, right?
What do I care? We're not going to join anyway, so it doesn't affect me one bit.
Oh my goodness, yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so who cares? But yeah, I think I've never understood daylight savings time, but and I don't even know when the U.S. goes on or off. Let's see, it's spring forward, fall back. So they're supposed to get out of daylight savings time, the rest of the country.
But we have now an argument whether we should continue to side with Serbia for our time zone, or if we should switch to the Bulgarian zone, because Macedonia is, I think, kind of right in the middle of the meridian, or what's it called, the line which decides which time zone we should be in. So obviously we were lumped with Belgrade, which was lumped with, like a central area of Yugoslavia to have one unified time zone in the whole of Yugoslavia. It was not that big to have two time zones.
Right.
But then Greece has a different time zone, Bulgaria has a different time zone, Turkey. So I had a weird situation driving to Corfu for vacation. I'm actually driving west, but the time zone switches as if I was driving to the east.
Oh, funny.
And now there is some push to have Macedonia lumped with Bulgaria in that zone and away from Serbia.
Cvetin, if only the most burning issue in Macedonia could be which time zone to join, then all would be well, all would be right. But that is for other people at another time and age to decide. Right now we've got, let's see, where do we start? Let's start with the rift between Pendarovski and Zaev. We're recording this on Monday, October 28th. The article I talked about in the monologue there about Pendarovski saying that even today you can't get used to using the word north, and that's from an Al Jazeera program, which airs later tonight, so we'll have the full. There might be some more tidbits in there later on, but apparently, so Pendarovsky is saying, number one, he's bothered by the use. Well, first of all, he's saying that all Macedonians are bothered by the use of the North. In fact check, true. In that, he is absolutely correct. He doesn't like it, can't get used to it. Says maybe one day he will, maybe as a conditional, means maybe, maybe not, but it creates doubt. Whereas his prime minister, Zoran Zaev, is saying, no, we go for it, we continue on the path forward because there is no alternative. And we continue implementing PRESPA domestically, even though, according to Article 110b, which is frankly a giant hole in the bloody agreement, says that Macedonia doesn't have to do it, but Zaev, because he is a mental midget and a moral leper, he says we're going full steam through this. So apparently there's a rift between the president and the prime minister. A rift between the president and the prime minister of the same party, in my opinion, is very good in this case. What else can you tell our listeners about this?
Well, Steva is from a different faction. He's more like this urban, city-dwelling Skopjaner faction, while Zaev is obviously as rural, as redneck as one could possibly be.
As Sayak as you can be.
Yeah, as evidenced by his recent gesture toward Mickovsky, where he showed an elbow, up yours. He said he literally...
Yeah, explain that, because a lot of people won't understand that.
Yeah, he was in Prilep with a bunch of his supporters, and he literally said, so what if we didn't get the date to open EU accession talks? And then he says, you think Mickovsky is gonna win, assume power, grab power in Macedonia? And he makes this gesture like up yours, and then he uses a Serbian phrase, malo sutra, which we often jokingly translate as little tomorrow, and means never, never gonna happen. But the idiot seals in the audience, they still clapped for this, but everybody was like, what? I mean, even for Zaev, you don't expect anything not sophisticated, you don't expect anything normal from him, but my God, this was really a cringe-worthy moment. So yeah, he's a Syriac, he's an opinok, this peasant shoe which is used to describe rednecks around here. And so they had this fight. They had a fight when Crvenkovsky tried to promote Pendarovsky as leader of the party as opposed to Zaev, and Shekerinska, who latched on to Zaev. Even though naturally Shekerinska belongs to the other faction, but I mean, I don't know what's with her. Maybe she was just hoping that he will be the one to bear the responsibility for the name change and maybe get arrested over the wiretapping, and she can inherit the party from him. So yeah, they have an actual fight. They have a confrontation which will get worse as they have to, the urban wing won the presidency through Pendarovsky. They'll need to divide the probably diminishing number of seats in parliament. So this is going to get worse. And yeah, as you said, now they have Pendarovsky jumped on the idea that we should decouple from Albania. Zaev wouldn't hear of it because he's even more in debt to the Albanian voters and Edi Rama than Pendarovsky is. Then Pendarovsky said we should investigate the racket scandal to a greater extent. Zaev wouldn't hear about it because it leads straight to his doorstep. And now Pendarovsky is making noises, even though Zaev did mention the Article 110b, but obliquely, and then he said, no, we're going to implement the treaty as if we are negotiating with the EU, as if nothing changed. But Pendarovsky made this statement, which is a bit more hawkish than Zaev. So yeah, even our friend Laris Geiser from this Italian newspaper, which has been publishing all the details about the racketeering scandal, he noticed, he says, look, this is turning into a rift. According to his reading of the situation, this is now creating into a fraction almost. Yeah.
Well, 2 points. Number one, you mentioned that Pendarovsky had wanted to decouple from Albania, and he was just in Albania meeting with President Ilir Meta. And I understand he was given the shaft by Edi Rama as well, the Prime Minister. He was supposed to meet with him and then canceled at the last minute. Of course, Edi Rama... I think Edi Rama had a spat with Pendarovsky earlier this year when Pedarovsky said we should decouple, and Rama said, not so fast in so many words. Number one. Number two, I want to go back to Article 110b. I think it was the former foreign minister under PASOK, which is a now defunct political party in Greece, Evangelos Venizelos, who brought that up first and pointed out that's a giant hole in the treaty. And he was the one that mentioned it on the Greek side. And so, I said in the monologue, the Greeks agree with this. But then it was, who was it from Vomero that went on Greek TV? I didn't write it down here in my notes.
Timcho Mutsunski, the international secretary, Timcho Mutsunski.
Right. Okay. Young guy. Seems to have caught the attention of a lot of my friends, at least in the Macedonian diaspora, and said, whoa, who is this guy? He's on fire. And, dared to go on Greek TV and basically say, I'm Macedonian, I speak the Macedonian language, we're never going to say anything other than Macedonia, and, oh, by the way, my Greek friends, when we get into power, we're going to overturn this damn thing.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Good for him.
Well, I remember even people like Phil Ricker would tell us privately that, well, let's join and then you can overturn it because Greece is giving us a irrevocable deliverable while we can always re-amend the constitution. Countries have changed their names from time to time. Czech Republic most recently is working on this. So, the Greeks understand this because this is exactly what Greeks would do, and they did with the European Union austerity reforms, where they would overturn them any chance they got. So they understand that they would give us something that is irrevocable, and then EU and NATO membership, and then we can just revoke the name issue. And Timcho told them as much. He said, the minute we're in, we no longer need this treaty, and it will be out the window.
Wow. Phil Ricker actually said that? I didn't realize that.
He told it
breaking news to me.
To me, he told it, I heard politicians tell me that he's been advising them. He would do this to encourage people, like, well, what's the big deal? Do it, and then screw the Greeks over. Who cares? This was his way of encouraging.
That is funny because we know that Phil was just brought before one of the committees in the U.S. House this weekend to testify over the Ukraine scandal. But maybe in 10 or 15 years he'll be called again to testify on this issue.
With police escort, hopefully, like he was in Washington.
Oh, Phil Ricker. Yeah, we never did get along, but I don't get along with any U.S. ambassador there for obvious reasons.
It's them, not you.
Indeed.
Yeah, we're entering a phase in which we're getting this solid back and forth between Vomero and the Greek conservatives. And basically, so this will go down. The Greek right wants this to go down. They practically violated the treaty when they pushed that Macedonia is lumped together with Albania. This is a serious violation of their obligation to allow Macedonia to open accession talks. They're saying, okay, we're not blocking them directly, but we're pushing them in the path of the moving Dutch train which wants to block Albania, and we're pushing them straight in the same direction, tying them together with Albania. So, they're literally violating their one obligation in the treaty. And they want to destroy the treaty as well, but they want to make it look like it's our fault. So it was eventually a conservative Greek newspaper, Katimerini, which pointed to this article as if we didn't know. And it's showing us, telling us, listen, you can use this article to torpedo that damn thing. But then Mutsunski Vomero is doing the opposite thing. Yeah, we are destroying the treaty, but let's make it your fault. So we are essentially warning the Greeks what we're going to do in a few years' time, or possibly, hopefully, in a few months' time once we join NATO. And if France says definitely no accession talks ever, what's the point of prolonging this anymore? So Vomero is saying, no, we want to join, and then we're going to torpedo it, so you fulfill your full obligation, and then we do it by as if the Greeks don't know this. So in essence, what Mutsunski is telling the Greeks is, okay, you either destroy it now and it's your fault, the destruction of the treaty, or we destroy it later once we've gotten what we can out of Prespa.
Okay, well, this then reminds me of the Ella Fitzgerald song, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off. You like potato and I like potato. You like tomato and I like tomato. Potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off.
Yeah. We say mastica, they say uso. Yeah, we can never. No way we can agree on anything.
Oh my gosh, we might be able to come up with a song on this.
Ah, yeah.
I like it. All right, this is next week's challenge. So. But going back to you mentioned Lotus Geiser, La Verita, and he's been talking more again this week about all the scandals, which seem it's funny, being you're a journalist and I follow the media. I'm in public relations, so I deal with the media over here on the side of the pond on a domestic issue and whatnot. But anyway, we both obviously are closely tied to media, news, journalists, etc. We follow all this, and it's kind of funny to watch the ebb and the flow, how it works with regard to Macedonia. So it seems like the scandals kind of, the reporting on that took a dip until this past week when Lars started talking about it again, because there was so much going on with the EU issue, this rift that I mentioned earlier, and now it seems like perhaps the scandals are going to come back because these are still ongoing cases, and if I'm correct, and they're still being investigated, right?
Well, as much as the prosecutors are allowed to investigate them, yes.
Yeah. What is the latest on that? I mean, I noticed that both Boki 13 and Katice Yaneva their detentions were again extended.
Yeah, they're gonna remain in prison for the time being, and the SDSM politicians, the two of them, which were expected to be initially charged, Frosina Reminsky and Alexander Kiratsovsky, they were both interrogated, but only Frosina has been charged, and she's now in detention, in house arrest, like a more comfortable form of arrest, while Kiratsovsky is at large still and not charged. But, well, there is obviously, as things get more difficult for SDSM, this started as an intra-SDSM fight because the prosecutor, Vilma Ruskovska, who charged these people, she's not a friend of Vomera, quite on the contrary, but apparently they had the feeling they're strong enough in SDSM so that they can indulge in some factional fighting using prosecutors, one side employing Katica, another side employing Vilma to do extortion, to get some money out of businessmen. But once the elections were called, both sides, everybody in SDSM understands that they cannot afford this type of fighting anymore. They need to close ranks. So I don't think we'll be seeing much in the way of charges until the elections, unless obviously if the fight between the urban and the rural wing escalates to the degree that polls show that the SDSM is losing horribly anyway, or a fight escalates over the division of the seats in parliament, that would rekindle this confrontation. But at the moment they have closed ranks, there are no leaks on their side, there are no leaks on the side of the prosecutors, but Vomera keep reminding them that, listen, we have more material than has been published, and Laris says, I have more material than what's been published so far. Vomera have said they have the transcripts of the testimonies, presumably by Orce Kamchev and other people who were interrogated by Vilma Ruskovska, and this would include Orce pointing his finger at politicians who were involved, and Laris apparently has more wiretaps. This is what he's saying. So, if SDSM wants to close ranks doesn't mean that the scandal goes away, but at this moment we were more preoccupied with the EU defeat and the electioneering.
Right, exactly. So yeah, again, that points to the fact that I think that the scandals will rise to being back in the media sphere more. You mentioned that Laris and Vomero, I think Branko Geroski, who's kind of started this way back in the early summer, has also said he has more material. And you got to think, for Citizen, with these scandals ongoing and all of these different groups claiming that they've got more material about this, that, and the other, and they could release it at any time in the coming months. We've got, just to kind of look at the calendar here, Zoran Zaev has to resign as prime minister by January 3rd at the earliest, I believe. Elections are April 12. Vomero gets to have the Interior Ministry and a couple of other ministries, Welfare and Labor, I believe. And so between now and April 12, any of this information that these aforementioned groups and individuals have could come to the fore and could be made public, which is going to further damage citizen and damage their re-election chances. And that's got to be weighing on their minds. Plus, with Katitsa and Boki, the two prominent ones still in detention, that is not a pleasant place to be for them. These are people who lived lives of prestige and honor and fame and money and everything else, and now they got nothing. And physically and mentally, it's got to be just really dragging them down. And at some point, they're going to maybe want to cut a deal or something to get out. That's just my...
Boki didn't really live a life of honor, but yeah, other than that,
right,
you're on the money. He's too pretty to stay in prison for long. Or maybe he should ask for the women's wing. I don't know. Maybe that works. Or plea insanity. That would work perfectly for him.
Do you have an insanity clause in your judicial system?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have. Yeah. And even if we didn't, something like that should definitely apply to poor old Boki. No, they should be enticed to testify against Zaev, because there is no point in putting Boki in prison and pretending that he is the mastermind. He's pretty smart. You gotta hand it to him, but he's no mastermind. He doesn't have the political clout, the power to pull this off without Zaev or people very close to Zaev, even above Frosina Remensky and Kiratsovsky. So, yeah, I mean, there is no way that he should be in prison and that everybody says the buck stops here. That's ridiculous. And, there was some pressure on Vomero to be constructive, to be team players, like, let's not overdo this before the European Council. You gotta support the opening of EU accession talks, even though the material were coming from Girovsky, they were not coming from Vomero. And Vomero can say, listen,
right.
what have we got with this person? He's been hating on us for years, like crazily hating on us. So they're clean even in this regard. And now the internationals have blocked us, apparently indefinitely, and there is no reason to hold this off much longer. I mean, there is no excuse to keep denying. Maybe just wait a little more until the start of the elections, but so as the whatever materials are available don't peter out. But I suppose people like Kurza might try to negotiate with Zaev as well. But Vomero, so the material coming from him, because the wiretaps, the recordings, there is no other explanation except that he gave it to he put it around,
right.
Trafficked it around. Allegedly Bulgaria has the materials too, but they have their own calculations. They publicly want to preserve Zaev in power. Boyko Borisov said as much. So this might be another source of pressure on Urza to make sure nothing else comes out before the elections. But Vomero doesn't have this type of considerations. I mean, they have there is no reason holding them anymore now that the European Council ended as it did.
Let's talk about the alternatives to EU membership, since we've talked about how the cheese-eating surrender monkey Emmanuel Macron said none to Macedonia and Albania, and everybody's got their knickers in a knot over that. And I think it's kind of funny that Zaev continues to insist that, quote, there is no alternative to EU membership, which, of course, anytime, and I think it's important to continue to reiterate this, anytime somebody says there is no alternative, that's a phrase used to shut down debate. It's also a logical fallacy. And that the man can only say one thing. He can only say there is no alternative, even as the so-called Balkan experts are talking about alternatives. So Florian Bieber, one of the ones that we like to poke fun at, from the University of Graz, recently said that actually there are alternatives to EU membership. Now I think
really,
yes, I think even he is committed to EU membership for Macedonia, etc. But still, And here's a good one. So James Kerlindsey, another one of our favorites that we like to talk about. He's from the London School of Economics. He's actually never been to Macedonia, but he pretends that he knows a lot about Macedonia. He says, and this goes to the point of changing the meaning of words, which is a dangerous place to be. He tweeted out, quote, "I subscribe to the view that EU integration of the Western Balkans is not enlargement, it is completion."
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So,
very
so he's totally changing the meaning of the words. So, and I know that there. What are some of the alternatives? Since we've already made the point that there actually are alternatives. What's the Norway one that we keep hearing about?
Well, that would be the Switzerland one, which I suppose is the same thing, but there is a lot of baggage coming. When you say that Macedonia should be Switzerland in the Balkans, this was the famous quote attributed to Vancho Mikhailov that we should have like cantons for Albanians, Macedonians or Bulgarians, Greeks, Jews within Macedonia, Vlachs. So like Switzerland, something like one country but a number of languages and tribes, etc. So to avoid this, harkening back to history, Gerald Knaus, who was most recently the famous supporter of Zaev in opening the border. He always has some creative ideas about the migrant flow into Europe, how we can reignite it. And he now came out with a proposal, even before the European Council, saying that we should push for a Norwegian option, which means we are part of the EU market. We have to adopt practically all of Europe's regulations in exports and production, etc. This is something which I suppose Macron would like. I suppose his idea is that we have a regulatory unification, tax harmonization, and all that other horrible Procrustean stuff. And but let's give it a fancy name, because Zaev, Rama, and Vučić came out with the name a mini Schengen, so everybody's mocking this. It looks horrible. It sounds horrible. So then we're going for a Norway in the Balkans, which obviously in Balkaners evokes fanciful, positive ideas. And this would mean us contributing to the EU budget, aligning our regulation with the EU, having unfettered access to the EU market, which we already have to a large degree. Maybe also movement of people and some kind of a visa. Even we have visa-free travel, maybe just like full employment opportunities, but not full membership, not voting rights in the EU. To this we say, well, sure, we wanted this. Gruevski kept talking about this. Everybody on our side kept talking about this as a great alternative to EU membership, which we can achieve without encountering a Greek veto and then without changing the name. But now that we were forced to change the name, what's the point of this alternative? Why, now that we have given up our deliverable, we want the full deliverable on your part. Otherwise, again, give us this, but then the Prespa Treaty is out, because Greece cannot block a Norwegian outcome in the Balkans. So, sure, we go back to we restore our national dignity and we join Europe, Balkan, Norway.
Does this include bringing the fjords to the Balkans as well?
Or the oil. I prefer the oil. If I had to choose.
There you go, yeah. Well, of course, if you get the fjords, you get the tourism too, but you already have pretty good. Macedonia's got a fair number of tourists coming in, and it increases every year. That's a spot of good news, actually. But you're right, the oil would be useful, I think. So, all right. So there are alternatives. We'll see where those proposals go. I see you mentioned Gerald. How do you pronounce his name? Knaus. And his proposal, I already saw it got shot down by a number of EU officials, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting to see, talking about rifts, it's interesting to see the rifts that are developing between all of the supporters of Macedonia changing its name in the first place. And the deeper you get into this, and the more the details emerge about what all this means, how they come out of the weeds and they start attacking each other on these various things. Because they never really thought it through to begin with. They thought that all you do is come up with a bunch of words on paper, ignore your populations and what they want, and slam it through Parliament, ignoring the consent of the governed and doing whatever you can to get it through Parliament. They thought that would make it all right.
Well, basically we did a 180 role reversal here. So people like Tanya Milevska, we keep going back to her because she's probably the most comical of all this from the Zaev side, who really reacted to the defeat in Brussels, possibly worse than from everybody else. So now she's supporting a plan B, Norway option, or she's angry at Knaus about the Norway option, but she actually, shortly after the council, she started talking about we need a plan B, they don't want us, let's not be the jealous girlfriend who got dumped by her boyfriend, let's not give them the satisfaction to see us beg, let's wait for them to come begging to us, some similar teenager stuff. And on our side, on the right, those of us who were supporting a looser alignment with the EU and who were warning about the dangers of creating this federalized space with a flag, with an anthem, and even worse, a military, a prosecutor, a unified tax code, and everything, that we definitely do not belong there, at least for another 50 years. But now our position, which has always been a plan B, but now we say, okay, wait, but is the name, do we reverse the Prespa Treaty? And if not, well, listen, then we want to join in full, and then we want to go full Visegrad, because we also see that once you're an EU member, you can also more easily, as Mutsunski said, reverse the Prespa Treaty, but then you can also start acting out like Orban or Kaczynski. We are much smaller, but we'll be in good company, we can align with them, and people get off your back once you're in, or they can't abuse you as much as when you're negotiating. So yeah, we've completely reversed our positions, although on our part it's more like a joke, and I would still hate to be part of a Macron-led European Union, and it's going to collapse anyway, even faster if he gets his wish.
That is true, and to reverse a popular phrase, always go full Visegrad.
Yeah. I go with I warn often Anne-Marie and Han, etc., that we're gonna Visegrad so hard once we're in.
Oh, we could turn it into a verb. I like it.
Yeah.
Well. Speaking of Johannes Hahn,
listen. Seriously, Gruevski is kind of like a founder of the group.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of Johannes Hahn and Anne-Marie Huber and all of those people, they're leaving as of Thursday, right?
Yeah. It's game over for them. But there is a lot of talk now. There is some casino opening up in Skopje now, and related to the chain in Gevgelia. And now on both sides we have people jumping at Han that he's now, the left is reigniting the old accusations that Han was well reimbursed for his services. Initially for protecting Vemera, now for failing to complete his task by, casino shares, and he used to work for a casino company in Austria, that this is his reimbursement. Obviously, Vemera on the right, everybody is also sharing this allegation. So, yeah, we're now joking that he is expanding his business, much like Zaev, his marijuana fields, that Han is expanding his gambling empire in the Balkans.
Oh, and frankly, because of the news cycle, what it is no longer 24 hours or 24 minutes, it's 24 seconds. People, some listeners won't even remember the scandals that Johannes Hahn was caught up in a previous life, which was only, 15 years ago, maybe? And that is what you just mentioned, the casinos and everything else that he was involved in. And these people are, when I say these people, I mean the European Union bureaucrats are... shall we say, a bit dodgy, to say the least. At least something. So.
Yeah, we've dealt with crooks, with like that quote in Oscar: murderers, crooks, bank robbers, etc. But you bureaucrats, sheesh! Like you make me nervous. Yeah. And then there is the other plan B, the ultimate plan B, which is obviously that. Albanians are threatening with nationalism, with a spike of nationalist fervor that if they're not
No.
joining the EU, even Bieber had some article. I just noticed this today in some of the in a Kosovo-based news website or whatever, and they're using a map of the Western Balkans. But since Serbia and Montenegro are negotiating already in their accession talks, they were left out. So what was left in the map was Bosnia, like an island all by itself, hasn't opened accession talks. Majority Muslim, obviously this is contributing factor to the decision in Brussels, and Macedonia, Albania, and Kosovo, which again would be a hugely Albanian-dominated region if we are left in the mini Schengen ghetto with them, without Serbia or Bulgaria, everybody in different stages of accession, and if we are left to harmonize our trade and labor rules and movement of goods and people with just Albania and Kosovo. I mean, this would mean war. This would mean partition very quickly of Macedonia. This would be a complete disaster. And this was in an article by Bieber.
Wow.
ECFR, the Soros-funded think tank, they were also warning of this in a more recent article, I think today or yesterday. So this is what's more likely to happen if, and the best solution to this is not European Union enlargement. The best solution is a proper Macedonian nation state like we had under Gruevski. This is what can discourage a partition here and a full-out war in Macedonia and in the region.
Ah, yes, but the nation state, that's so passé. Come on.
Yeah.
This idea of nation states and sovereignty and all that. Get with the program, Sven.
Yeah. Brave new world out there.
Yeah.
And then there is another, very interesting fluke of this whole situation. Now that we have established that European Union member states can impose on a candidate country the change of something so ingrained, so deep and fundamental as the name of the country, the name of the people, the language, and the identity of the people. I mean, for the longest times, the European Union countries were ashamed to tell us that this is what they stand for, so they would insist that we fail on technical grounds and not because Greece is vetoing us. They realized what they're asking of us, and they would say, no, the Greens would support us precisely on these grounds. Do not give up your name. This is a horrible, crazy thing for the Greeks to ask of you. Well, now that this precedent is made, and Albanians all voted in favor of this, and they kept telling us, listen, you're blocking, you're dragging us down with your stupid name and your national dignity. You need to change this because you're crapping on our EU prospects. But now, you have Macron coming out and he says, well, listen to all these Albanians coming to France, claiming asylum. This is unbearable to many of them. Why would a candidate country have so many asylum seekers? He's all but saying that the problem is not with the Albanians as such, but the problem is with the fact that Albanians are Muslims. And, well, now on our side, the obvious retort is, well, now that we have established that a candidate nation needs to change something to be more appealing to the EU member states, and now that we have a clear, demand from a powerful EU member state what needs to be changed,
right? And
now that you impose this principle on us, our Albanian neighbors, well, now you're dragging us down, and now it's time for you to change this. Actually, far more recent characteristic of your nation, which they've only adopted Islam like 300, 250 years ago, and even this gradually. So, well, it's all for our European future, right?
Oh my goodness, that's funny. Yeah. All right, why don't we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with our farmer's biz.
Hajde shoto mashallah futuro meka. Hajde shoto mashallah futuro meka. Luj moj shoto luj, ditën ta paguj. Luj moj shoto luj, ditën ta paguj. Hajde shoto mashallah futuro
And welcome back to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. This is Cvetin Shalimanov, and we have Jason Miko as always on the line. And it's now time for our farmers picks. Jason has something prepared for us. Can you tell us what it is?
Absolutely, Sven. It is Lonely Planet, the popular travel guide, and they have their top 10 picks for 2020. Number 3, Macedonia. Now, 2 points. Obviously, they use the N-word, and I think it was a year and a half ago, I had a quick dialogue on Twitter with one of the editors of Lonely Planet, and I said, it's really Macedonia, and she actually said, I completely agree, I'll always call it Macedonia, but, we're a corporate entity, blah, 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 we're going to have to call it that. I get that to a degree, but I think any PR that brings in, especially tourists, and amplifies the nation is good. Plus, it's kind of funny, I think they say in their little quick paragraph on it, they say, a place most known simply as Macedonia, which is correct. And then it's funny, because if you click on the map that they provide, I don't know what map this is, but it goes to a map and it says Republic of Macedonia. So, and then of course it lists all the places in Macedonia, and frankly, this piece on Macedonia was done a couple years ago when they highlighted Macedonia, and so the only thing they did was put the N-word in front of Macedonia, a bunch of places. But it's always good to be called out for the beauty and the gastronomy and the landscapes and just everything that Macedonia has to offer, especially the wine. So that's my pick. Well, they call it North Macedonia. Macedonia is number 3 on the Lonely Planet pick of places to visit in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I remember I saw the U.S. ambassador share this, and I said, come on, no EU accession talks, no Nobel Prize for Zoki, not even the Eurovision contest, you couldn't even rig this. But okay, at least we got a Lonely Planet blurb. Thank you.
Excellent.
A reprint under the new name.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Apparently. Oh, jeez. Well, this is like the Jack and the Beanstalk all over again. Maybe Zaev basically gave up the country for the magical marijuana beans, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very droll. Very droll. All right. Well, that's our... I know I said we said Macedonian Farmers Picks. We have Macedonian Farmers Pick, singular. Next week... I already know what I've got for next week, but that's next week. So, anyway, again...
Lean harvest this week.
Exactly. So, today is the 28th. This will drop tomorrow on the 29th of October. I'm sure there'll be plenty of news in the next few days when we record again on Sunday. Always great talking to you, Sven.
You too, buddy. Take care.